So we have these new technologies. I think we all recognize some of these logos. They're providing richer and richer information. But today's challenge, as we talk to people, is really the judgment to use it. And one thing that I've seen over my time of talking to folks is it's not about the data. It's not about the technology. It's like, give me a framework. Help me understand how to make sense out of it. And that is what we're going to talk about. Personally, every day, we're authors second, and we're business people first. So we know what it's like to sit in these chairs, and that's the perspective we're going to take. Collectively, everyone in this room, our goal is to help our companies grow. And we have the information at our fingertips. And how do we get that judgment to help the companies grow? So this perspective and experience is really built from Fortune 50 companies. I've done some startups, so has Paul. We work with venture capitalists. We work in different functional lines in marketing, sales, and consulting. I've been on the agency side. I've been on the client side. Every week, on average, I'm getting about 3 to 5 calls from different vendors, from different agencies, pitching a new technology, pitching a new way to collect information, to measure, to listen. And I can tell you, just the volume is overwhelming me just from the pitches. I would love to engage with them, but they're missing the point. It's not about the technology.
So you're probably wondering, well, why does it take 2 people to be up here to have this conversation? And the fact is, I'm not from the market research side. I'm from the business line. So I am the consumer of market research. And the perspective that we'll share today bridges that gap. I've had experiences at IBM through the years, building businesses. Occasionally, probably the most fun experience I had was my boss said, here's some seed money, here's a blank sheet of paper, 1 word on it, go build a business around that. Go. Okay? So the only way that was successful was by teaming with market research. With OPENET, you're probably using our stuff today. It's in the telco networks. So a lot of the conversations earlier about what's happening online with mobile and so forth, we're one of the engines underneath all of that. And again, in the business line, as I try and grow the business, my best collaboration is when I work across the aisle with the market research team.
And one thing we've seen from all of this experience, and I think this quote sums it up the best, he uses statistics as a drunk man uses a lamppost for support rather than illumination. And we see that every day. We get these 40, 50 page decks, we get these emails with numbers, and it's not telling us anything. It's not making us smarter. People are leaning on it for support and not to make us smarter, not to advance the dialogue, not to shape the strategy. So we started talking about this, and Paul and I, we know each other for about 25 years. He went to IBM, I went to Microsoft. That was always a fun conversation. And one thing we've said is, what are the skills required for leadership? And we came across these McKinsey quotes, and there's 2 that really stuck out for us. First of all, leaders in every sector will have to grapple with implications of big data. Not just the data-oriented managers, not just the insight professionals, not just the market research folks, everybody. And number 2, by 2018, in the next 6 years, we're going to face a shortage of about 140 to 190,000 people with deep analytic skills. And the thing that strikes me about that, it is 10x the amount of people with deep analytic skills that we need to actually engage with the data. So when we think around our careers, when we think around our future, when we think around building our teams, and what professional development and skills we need to develop, it started us down this path of what is that gap?
And not just what is that gap, what is that collaboration? If you're in the business line, it used to be, well, I need some information, let me just give a call over, they'll dip the bucket into the well, pull out the information, and give me an answer. Nowadays, I have to be conversant in this new vocabulary as the information is flowing on a daily basis, and it's because more and more iterative dialogue. So it's no longer, hey, let me throw it over to them. They'll give me an answer when they give me an answer. It might look like a hockey stick chart. Maybe that'll be helpful. That's not the dialogue today. Not if you're going to grow a business. No. So we're going to do a little survey. And
So we're going to generate more information.
we're going to generate more information live as we speak. Does everybody feel excited about this? Okay. So our premise that we'll take you through the presentation is that there are 4 phases. There's discovery, how you get the information; interpretation, how you analyze it; delivery, how you communicate it; and decision making, how you act on it. So we'll talk about all of those. But what we'd like you to do right now is answer this question: what is the biggest skill gap around making smarter decisions in the face of new technologies? So you text to 22333, and then you text the number next to your choice, A, B, C, or D. And that's the 6-digit number.
Talk about new technologies and generating information. We're bringing it live. So we're at the magic number 75. So clearly, it is around decision making, and that's what McKinsey has said. How do we use this information? How do we curate the information to use it to become smarter about the customer, to make our strategies become stronger, more informed, and also to know, more importantly, what we're leaving on the cutting room floor and what data we're using it and moving forward. And that's one thing when we talk about the fire hose of information. We are not going to turn off the fire hose. What we are going to try and talk about across these 4 phases is how do you regulate it? How do you regulate it through discovery, through interpretation, when you deliver and communicate it, and more importantly, how do you, for decision making. So, it looks like it's going to be decision making and interpretation, and we will talk to each one of these. Everyone wants to press the reset button as they talk around marketing. With all these new technologies out there, whether you use a marketing funnel or Harvard, I think in December of 2010 came out with the marketing loop, the fundamentals have not changed. The marketing principles remain consistent. So as we think around new technologies, that underlying framework still exists. Established tools, it's all around driving awareness, consideration, getting conversion, and then advocacy. With these new technologies, whether we're talking, neuro research, we're talking digital, mobile, and engage with our brands, with our products, with each other, does not change. And I think that's important, and that is something we should be grounded in as we think around information. Because if you put it in this framework as people think about it, it will inform their decision making. That came out to be the #1 skill area, and also from this room, that's where people feel that it is. But when you deliver information, if you are clear on where they are in this life cycle, it will help to start to inform that dialogue, that decision.
So what we want to talk about is a few practical perspectives, and there are 3. And hopefully we're going to give you 3 tools to walk out of here with that you can use on a daily basis. So the first is, as all this information is flowing at you, you need to understand yourself and understand how you interpret the information. What I see and what Chris sees and what you all see may be very different based on our cognitive bias, based on our background and so forth. So how do you interpret that information that's coming at you? Understand yourself. The second is adopt a framework to become that fierce interrogator. And so we'll spend the bulk of our time on that. And that's the 7 questions that we've evolved from our mutual experience through the years. And then the last is to drive leadership through analytics and quantitative intuition. So at the end of the day, you can churn the numbers, you can do a variety of things, but unless you're driving towards a goal, driving towards a decision, action that increases your business, grows your business, what's the point of it? So a little focus on that at the very end. So we'll begin with the first one. Building on what Chris was saying about the marketing funnel, let's think about the world that we live in today. So there's the notion of information fatigue. And what's really different is the volume, the velocity, and the variety of information that's coming at us. So I'm sure you all know the statistics. Last year, 2011, The Economist said 1,200 exabytes of data were generated by digital society. So what's that? That's 22 million times the amount of information that prior to that point had ever been written. Really? What is all that? Well, some of it's video, some of it is, the cat on the video screen, and some of it is useful information. But there's a lot of it out there, and we are the creators of it. That's the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you've got some of the companies that are trying to organize it. So you've got your IBMs and Microsofts of the world that have solutions out there. You have some open source solutions. My favorite is Factual. Does anybody know Factual? So Factual has a fairly straightforward goal. Do you know what it is?
Basically, solve every answer in the world with data.
That's right. Catalog every fact in the world, ever. So what would you do if you had every fact in the world, ever? By the way, I think they'll succeed. Their founder was one of the original guys at Google. Brilliant. I'm sure he'll get there. Question is, what would you do with that information if you had it? So let's think back 100 years. There was no internet. All right, you're all seated, so no one passed out on that. So there's no internet, and you have a project team, and you have to go figure something out. Launch a project. And I give you one full copy of the New York Public Library. Do you start with the letter A, go all the way through Z, and then start your project? No. You don't dive in and say, well, I've got to interpret all the information, all that big data in front of me. I have to internalize before I can move forward. I'm not paralyzed by the ability to understand that big data before I can take my first step. Because in fact, the first step is putting some parameters around that. What is it that you're really looking for? What's important to your business? And so it's those early questions that help orient where you're going, and then allow you to use the tools, some of the new tools that we see at the bottom, the neurosciences, the digital tools, the web tools, the wireless tools. So it's that question up front, those set of questions up front that orient you, that are more critical than, well, can I gather all the information?
When they opened the conference today, they said, I forget what year it was, when they talked about internet and research, 6, 7 years ago, 1995. And we could be here in another 5 years, and it's not going to be neural research, it's going to be something we can't even imagine. So the technology is going to evolve. That bottom end of the chart is going to become even bigger, and that's great. But one thing, I do a lot of work in social media. I set up one of the first social media listening systems at Microsoft, put in an assessment system for our PR. And then when I went to American Express, 162-year-old company, and we put in a social media listening system there across the entire enterprise. And everyone is spinning on social and data, and they want to track it by the second. And I try to tell them and give them perspective. It is just one piece of new information, another input. And I think that perspective is critical as you think around these new technologies. We need to embrace them. They're amazing technologies, but we also need to understand what they do for us and how they make us feel.
So building on what Jane was talking about before, as leaders, how do you deal with this? How do you feel? So a non-technology survey. Who feels overwhelmed? Raise your hand. Okay, who feels in denial? Raise your hand. Okay, who's fighting to break through? Okay, I suspect that in any week, you feel each of these emotions, depending on where you are with your project and the current fire drill that's happening. So again, you need to understand how the information is coming at you. You also need to understand how you react to that information, and then build that tool set for yourself. The first tool that we want to talk about is to understand that what's critical for leaders is to be balanced and ambidextrous. You need to make the most of all the facts that are in front of you. You know, back in, I think it was the 1950s, IBM and GE and a variety of other companies went about creating a leadership management program. First thing they did is they went to some leading academics and said, what is it that we need to train these people for? These people who are going to be our new leaders. And they expected, well, you know, we need math, we need verbal, we need, you know, the kinds of things that maybe they test on an SAT or achievement exam. And when they did their survey, it was a scatter. There was not a nice bell curve. What they also realized was that the leaders, the top leaders, were kind of a little out there. They were at the edges. And the skills that they had was the ability to connect the dots and the ability to operate in ambiguity. So it wasn't the ability to crunch numbers. It was an ability to make some decisions early on. So one decision is very straightforward. If you're leading a team, if you're trying to make a step forward, if you've got a bit of information, what are you trying to do with it? Are you trying to inform, or are you trying to compel? Are you trying to share information to build knowledge and awareness and maybe consensus and brainstorming? Or are you trying to drive to action with that bit of information? That simple binary right there can orient what you're doing moving forward. And how often does that not happen? We presented recently, and a person who was at a top 50 pharmaceutical company came up to us afterwards and said, gosh, we complicate things. We just really complicate things. We put layer upon layer, structure upon structure, and we don't make some simple decisions up front to orient what we do.
I saw a lot of hands go up around on the last one, fighting to break through. And this seems very basic and fundamental, but it will change what information you pull in, how much time you prepare. It will also orient the dialogue in the meeting and who you invite to meetings. I mean, we all feel a little bit of meeting madness. When you go into the meeting and you're wondering who has the ball. And people sit there and they don't know why they're there. And if you ask this simple question up front, and this happens and I do this to my team all the time, what's the purpose of this meeting? Are you trying to inform brainstorming? Or do you want me to compel me to act? Or are we going to make a decision? Because it changes my mindset. It changes what I expect of them, the information that I need, and then the dialogue we will have. So even asking this, and every time someone says, can you join this meeting? Do we want to inform or compel? It's a very simple but powerful tool that I think everyone could start to apply tomorrow. So, number 2, adopt the questions to become a fierce interrogator. We all have goals, we all have commitments, we all want to, achieve that vision. And everyone says, give me insight, give me the aha, give me that nugget, give me that factoid. Go out there and talk to these consumers. Pull this information. Look online. We have it at our fingertips. I want insight, insight, insight. And what we have found is the missing piece is not about insight. The missing piece is really questions. And that may seem counterintuitive, but why? Questions give permission. It is the most important tool you can add to your leadership kit. It is the most important skill you can teach your teams. How many times have we been in meetings and you will prepare for weeks, crunching the information, building the slides, doing dry runs, and you go into that meeting and 5 minutes into it, the senior person will hold up their hand and say, I have a question. What about X? And you're like, wow, that's a good question. And it was obvious, and it was sitting there. And they have not been studying this as you have. But it gave them permission to engage with you. Permissions remove ambiguity. Help me understand why we're doing this. Help me understand the decision. Help me understand to frame the issue. It enables real dialogue. It will change the dialogue. It will expose the gaps. It will pressure test your logic. And it will also reveal who's engaged. If we ask a question to the room and someone answers, they're probably listening to you. and they have a perspective. I love this quote again by Albert Einstein. The most important thing is not to stop questioning. Too many times in our discipline, we focus on finding the answer, on the insight. And when I went to American Express, one of the skills that I introduced is around the essential question, and we'll talk about that. But I taught my team to ask questions of their business partners. And the business partners were amazed. They're like, I've never had this level of dialogue with the research team. Because it actually changed the research, it changed the technologies we pulled in, it changed the information, it changed the analytics, and we talk about breaking through. We talk around earning a seat at a table and being trusted advisors. Questions enable you to do that. So, we started with inform and compel, and this is kind of a waterfall framework. So, up front, define the outcome. That will then inform discovery. That will help you figure out the information that needs to be organized and analyzed. It will guide how you interpret it. It will help you with that predictive ability to intuitively see into a situation. And most importantly, delivery. The packaging of the insights to help people act differently. As researchers, we should think of ourselves as editors, as producers of movies. We collect all this data. Just as they produce a movie, they film hours and hundreds of hours of film, yet the final film is only 2 hours. So that delivery is critical. So this last component of the waterfall, how you deliver information, I think a lot of times we kind of set on the side, or we rush it at the end. So we're going to talk a bit about that.
So tool number 2 is really the framework that we talk about in our book. And increasingly we realize that what we're talking about here is the rhythm of your business. It's not about a specific tool at a specific moment. It's just understanding that this is like jazz. You're going to go back and forth, you're going to iterate, you're going to use a set of tools like this to really dive into the data in a more compelling way and get the real information out of that. Make some real business decisions and not just push more data around. So I'll walk through these very quickly. Spend a minute or two on each. So the first one, or the first set is around discovery. So the first one is I wish I knew. So you're trying to reveal the indispensable information. What is the piece of information that you need in that moment to move the business forward? Now there could be different views of that, whether you're the P&L owner or a product manager or what have you, but that is situational, and that should guide what it is that you're trying to analyze, what it is that you're trying to pull from the information. The second one goes hand in hand with the first. Where is the customer's North Star? So the North Star is constant, as should your view and everyone in your company, their view of what problem you're solving for your customers. What is your value proposition? What is it that you stand for? I worked for IBM for 21 years. IBM can pretty much do anything. But why? Why would you do something? There's some corporate DNA that says, this is inbounds, this is out of bounds. This is what we do. This is what we have brand permission to do from our customers. So understand that North Star and stick to it. I'll give you one quick example. Netflix.
Yeah, Netflix is interesting. We talk around discovery. I think we all are familiar with what happened with Netflix about a year ago. They had all the information at their fingertips. They knew that the business is going to streaming, to online information, to online movies and downloads. They know that that's where the customer is going. But they made a decision on a couple of levels. First of all, they focused on the financial impact and not the customer impact. I'm sure they crunched their numbers 9 ways to Sunday on the ROI, on how this is going to be better for us, and we're going to save distribution and channel cost and everything. They did take the time to truly understand the customer's North Star. that they like the brand. They like the simplicity of it. They knew the brand. So what did Netflix do? They went out and they created a new brand called Quickster. So they kept Netflix, they created Quickster. They also created a new account for you automatically. They created a separate website. They created a separate login. You all of a sudden didn't have a single queue anymore. They also raised the price by 60%. So when we look at these questions around North Star or the indispensable information in decision making, this is real. Netflix lost, I believe it is about 75% of their market cap in a matter of about 90 days. They were losing tens of thousands of customers a month, and they still have not recovered. So while these seem fundamental, I think making sure that everyone within the company is focused on the North Star. And we do a quick exercise, and I do it with my team, and I do it with my business partners. I say, tell me in 5 words or less, what do our customers want? If I don't get at least some level of consistency, we're not clear. So Netflix made the right financial decision. They didn't make the right customer decision. They had the information at their fingertips, how they made that decision, then how they executed it, and then finally how they're trying to come out of it. They're still not back yet.
I believe the quote was, oops, we got it wrong. Awesome. So, moving on. Should you believe the squiggly line? Hey, great news. It's Monday morning, you just found out you're up 5 points. What do? Throw a party. Except you didn't bother to check that your competitor is up 8 points. Or you're up 5 points because of some anomaly. You sell shovels. There was a snowstorm. Put it in context. Look at the baseball season. Red Sox had a terrible start to the season. Should you fire Bobby Valentine? Anyone? Anyone?
Yes.
Good answer. Yankee fan. Anyway, so no booze. Usually I get some booze to that. So put it in context. It's a 162 game season. What is your position? What is your relative position? And oh, by the way, how does that moment in time, that measure at that moment in time, how does that change your long-term strategy? It's a great conversation to have, but have that conversation. Don't have the knee-jerk conversation of, we're up 5 points, therefore let's do something that actually is going to injure us over time or upset our customers. So what surprised you? Who went to a party this weekend? Anyone? No one went to a party this weekend. Okay. A couple of people here have a pulse. Okay. They went to a party this weekend. So think back when you went to your last family function and you leave with your significant other. And there's a little conversation in the car. Did you hear this? Did you know that? I heard this. Those are all conversations about these little surprise moments. These are conversations we have all the time. Yet we don't look for the surprises in our business. We are open to the discussion in our personal lives, but we're not open to the discussion in our business lives to permit the dialogue, to get beyond the bias. Surprise is a bias killer. So getting beyond that bias is not very difficult if you create the space for it. So as leaders, you're creating these decks and these presentations and you're trying to bring an answer forward, and you have an outlier. What do you do with it? That doesn't fit the model, let's put it away. As the business line leader, I might actually want to know what that is. So you can structure a conversation and say, let me just take a few minutes here at the end to say, here's some things we didn't know what to do with. We didn't know where to put it in context with everything else, but my hunch says there's something interesting here. That's very powerful. That's what I'm looking for from a market research team that's collaborating with me.
And in fact, in all the slides and presentations that we do right now for my team, there's an actual slide up front that says what surprised us. And it is the one slide that everyone stops on right now, because that's where the new learning comes from. And we'll have the 2 or 3 points that we didn't understand in the data, didn't expect to see from the data, cannot explain it. And then we layer in business acumen, intuition, experience. We brainstorm around those surprises. And again, it changes how we engage in the information that we're pulling, the technologies that we want to use, because some people want to go deeper on those surprises.
So what does the lighthouse reveal? The metaphor is about sailing and bringing your ship into port. So when you're sailing and bringing the ship into port, there's 100 things to worry about. But really, maybe there's only 4 or 5. You need to know that the reef is there, the tides are going a certain way, the winds are a certain way today. You need to know what all those other 97 things are, but those 3 or 4 or 5 are the ones to focus on. So we get lost in the minutiae, we get lost in all the little details, but the suggestion is focus on the boulders, focus on the big issues, and then track the others. And by the way, once you bring the ship into port, for me on the business line, we just created a success, didn't we? We just navigated a new path for a new product, a new solution, a new offering, something that customers wanted. We navigated around the obstacles that were the barriers for a customer's purchase or the customer adoption. And now we have a success. So the other side of the metaphor is a lighthouse is a beacon of success. You can then turn to the business line team, to the sales team and say, see this? Go repeat that. That's what we're going to codify, that's what we're going to build our model around and our go-to-market around. Because we've now seen that this was not an anomaly. We actually looked at all the data. We saw the things that are truly relevant and navigated by way of that and now have a success that we're going to build upon.
Anyone thinks that market research, anyone of your business partners think that market research will give you the answer? They don't have an educated or informed view of market research, what it can do and what it can't do. And just like the lighthouse highlights the 5 big rocks you need to navigate around, effective market research, we call it, modeling, analysis, it will say with a high degree of confidence, we have 65 things in a survey, and we captured all these data points, and with a high degree of confidence, you can put these 60 on the side. And now these are the 5 big rocks you need to build your strategy around, and let's discuss it. That's what effective market research will do. And then again, like I was saying, you in your experience, your strategies, your investment, your competitive context, to then figure out how to navigate through those waters.
So swing voters, borrowing a page from the political playbook. There's a set of customers that I care about. And I need to know those who are satisfied and dissatisfied. And depending on the group, as a business line leader, I'll put tactics in place to either expand the wallet share of the satisfieds or put a win-back strategy against the dissatisfieds. But it's that group in the middle that I'm not quite sure what to do with. And more often than not, your business leaders will say, I don't know, just go call on the customers that we know. Pray for the big whale or the bluebird. If I'm smart, I have a conversation with the market research team and I say, that part of the curve, that segment of the market that is not really clear to me, what are the tactics to move those people that are on the fence, to move them into the win column, which actually grows our business this quarter and next quarter? So how would I do that?
So we call them neutrals. They're usually the big gray part in the bar or the pie chart. So say for example on a 1 to 10 scale, we a lot of times we report top box and bottom box, 8, 9, and 10. But there are the people that are in the 7s that are leaning towards us. And if we could figure out what, how they look different or how they look similar to people that gave us an 8, if you want to move those numbers, focus on those people that are giving you the 7s. And more importantly, the people that are also giving you 4 ratings. You have a big people that are giving you a 4, that is, a couple of clicks away from falling into the dissatisfied bucket. So a lot of times people work with net promoter. You have the detractors and promoters. There's a big group in the middle. So regardless of whatever your key performance indicator is, go back and look at if you have that group in the middle, and how many times do you actually understand them, profiling them, model against them, to understand what can move them. Because I started out by saying we all want to help our companies grow. You're going to get your fastest growth by moving people that are predisposed to liking you, the 7s, the leaders, to get them to be 8s and 9s. Then you're able to get the 1, 2, and 3s to move up the chain.
So the last section around delivery. What, so what, now what? It's our focus 3-in-1 question. So we've actually kind of talked a bit about what and so what. It's really the now what where we fall down, isn't it? You come to that 59th minute of the meeting, and okay, what's our action plan? Let's schedule another meeting. Again, awesome. What are we doing? We're not making the time to say, what is it that we need to do to move forward? What is the now what that is required based on the information that we have to make those actions, to take the right actions? And oh, by the way, if we haven't figured it out, maybe there needs to be more collaboration across the business line and the market research team to dive into a particular pool of data a little bit differently. We're not having those conversations. Gets back to what we said before, are you informing or are you compelling? Well, at some point you need to compel, you need to move to action, and so you need to answer the question, now what? What is our action at this moment? How do we drive this forward? And not, hey, we just looked at some more graphs and charts that say this will be a big business someday.
So, leadership. We talked around our goal is decision making. And as you go through that process, a lot of times in research we stop at the what. Maybe we talk about the so what. But to truly become leaders, you need a combination of both the analytics and also something we call, go back a minute, quantitative intuition, which is interesting. But business partners and clients want us to have an opinion. That's also what I look for my agencies that I hire and retain. I want them to make me smarter, not just collect the information, not just talk to me about the new tool. I get a lot of calls every week from potential new vendors with great technology, and they are fantastic technologies, but they're missing this last part. They're not willing to be consultants to me, and that's what I'm looking for. I want them to come in and ask me questions about my business, not saying I can listen faster to your clients. So,
and just building on that, I can't stress this more, that on the business line side, I beg of you, come in with an opinion when you're working with your companies. It's mind-numbing to me how often the market research teams hold the line that they need to be completely agnostic. Now, I understand there's a reason for some of that, but if you're invested in the business the way we are, we're part of the same team, it helps to factor in that intuition that you have, factor in that opinion, make space for these different segments of the conversation that we've talked about, and help me move the business forward, and not just give me an agnostic viewpoint and say, figure it out for me.
So we started to think around, what does this mean for our role as researchers, as insight professionals? We are not market researchers. What we need to strive to be are leaders. And great leaders bridge these gaps and help navigate this ambiguity. I want folks on my team, when they think around their role, to be a fearless interrogator. Why are we doing this? What's our strategy? Why do you need this information? Who do you want to talk to? Are you actually going to take action on this information? I want them to think of themselves as growth champions. How do we move those 7s to 8s? I want them to think of themselves as business partners. I tell my team, you do not have clients internally. Because if you think you have clients, that implies a client-service relationship. You are a professional. You are invested in this business to build on Paul's point, just as we are. So you are an intelligence builder, a truth teller, a customer steward. There is no one that has the freshest, richest information like the market research team. We have our finger on the pulse of that information, and that's what these technologies give us. We have the right, the authority. In fact, we should be going into a meeting and pounding our fist on the table saying, this is what the customers are saying. This concept of stewardship is very powerful for researchers. It also frees them to have that opinion. And finally, we need to be irritatingly objective. And that is something my CMO, John Hayes, tells me all the time. I want you to be irritatingly objective, not just objective, irritatingly objective. And I'm like, are you sure, John? And I usually ask him that after an annual review season is over. So this concept of leadership and market research and insights is critical. And as we go through the next 2 days in this conference, keep this in mind as we think around new technologies.
So if you're going to curate the conversation, which is what we're talking about, you also need to understand how to communicate that out. And a simple influence map may help. So you've got these facts, and you want to inform or compel. We've talked about that. But how do you go about doing that? So first you need to understand where you fit in. What is your power base? Are you in a position of leadership on the team, so you have that positional authority? Are you acknowledged as an expert? Or do you have all the information at hand? Perhaps it's more than one of the three. And there are subsegments, but this is a pretty good view. And then let's assume that you have the relevant information. Well, how do you increase your reach? How do you amplify that? And so this is where some of the tools can come into play as well. Tools to gather, tools to analyze, tools to communicate. So your influence map is not just about what is your role. It's also a map to say, who do I need to align with in my division, in my group, in my company, across companies, that can help get this message out. There's a lot of work across companies, right? So this is useful as well. Understand if you're in one column and you need an ally in another column, work through that. And the key is that great leaders are great simplifiers, they're insightful decision makers, but they're great communicators. They can tell a story. They don't put numbers out there and say, figure it out. They tell a story, and they understand how to tell a story and how to compel that audience to action, and they understand their channels to do that. So, simple little tool to figure out how to communicate out that. So, the last thing we want to talk about builds upon that, and it's around how leadership is manifested.
So the movement that leader was doing was so simple, others could replicate it. And that's what we're trying to talk through these questions. And the three tools we talked about this morning. So, and if you could do that, you know, everyone has seen this movement. It's that first follower that got up. So we think about these questions and information. Leadership is to see what everybody else has seen and to think what nobody else has thought. To say, that's something over there, we should go and follow it. So when we live and sit in these seats and we work for our businesses every day to help them grow. And these questions are something and the tools in general, the three of them are taking root. And that really gave birth to pulling together these kind of talks. We want to start this movement. Next one. So, call to action. We started with these 4 buckets: decision, interpretation, discovery, and delivery. Every project, every client, every agency, whatever requests you have, just take a few minutes and think about these 4 levers. We talk around the information and the firehose. Depending on how you answer this, will allow you to regulate the firehose. Inform or compel. Do you need analytics or intuition? Are you brainstorming? I think in discovery, we're in this transition from this ask of research of surveys and digital and mobile and internet surveying to more listen. Depending on, again, where you are on the spectrum, will impact and inform what technologies you pull in. And then delivery. We spend a lot of time on measurement versus insight. Again, every discussion that you have, you get an RFP or you send out an RFP, just kind of quickly use these to frame it as something that is simple to follow, like the shirtless dancing guy. I know that's what you're going to probably remember from this presentation. I don't know if that's good or bad. But these are simple movements and simple tools we're trying to share today so you could go back to your companies and replicate.